right. We're just gonna kick things off now, so we have enough time for everything. But good
Mhm.
afternoon again, everyone. My name is Molly McCaig. I'm the Operations and Membership Manager here at MNN. Just have a few quick housekeeping items before we dig into today's webinar. The recording and slides from the program will be emailed to you following the webinar, so please keep an eye on your email for that. If you have any technical difficulties throughout the workshop at all, feel free to reach out in the Zoom chat. And if you have any questions for our presenter, Donato, you can submit those via the chat or Q&A function at any time. And we'll be sure to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. Um, to give a little bit of background here at MNN, our three goals are to strengthen the nonprofit sector through advocacy, public awareness of our sector, and our capacity building services. So offering these regular webinars in partnership with our affiliate members is one of those capacity building efforts, and please stay tuned for any future topics in the coming weeks and reach out if you have any topics that you'd like to see us cover in the coming months. Our efforts are made possible by our more than 600 member organizations, and to those of you who are members, thank you for your partnership. If you have not yet joined but are interested, please feel free to visit our website or email me. I'll leave my information down in the chat as well. Today's webinar is titled Crafting a Strong Nonprofit Website RFP, Insights from a Web Designer's Perspective, and is presented by Donato D'Andreo of Compete Now Web Design. And I'll hand it over to Donato to introduce himself and get us started.
All right. Thanks so much. Yes, I'm Donato D'Andrea. I'm the president at Compete Now, website design, branding, and digital marketing. I've been in business for about 15 years and really worked on a lot of nonprofit websites over the years. And particularly when the pandemic started, it seemed like all of a sudden we were working on lots of nonprofit sites. I think there was just a time there where everybody needed to relook at their website and say, wow, now we really need to leverage our website for all of our communications. So that really just led to us doing a cluster of a lot of the nonprofit sites in one shot. And that's why we joined Mass Nonprofit Network, because we enjoyed working with them so much that and really focused on, mission-driven organizations really became a passion of not just mine, but our team. And we've even hired people because they want to join that as well. So this was a topic. We've done topics before just for like nonprofit website design tips and things like that. But, we felt like we should put out an educational resource that is really talking about RFPs because we feel bad for that our nonprofit clients are really, they don't build websites every day. So they're tasked with trying to put together an RFP that can be very detailed and work within the budget that the organization really has. And it can get tricky because nonprofit sites are a lot more complicated and have a lot more information and content than a lot of small, even for-profit websites. So I hope that over the course of this presentation, get some good things to know to really make a great RFP and attract the best partner for your project possible. Because, we'll go through that over the course of this, but that it really goes a long way to have an accurate RFP to make sure that the project then is a success so that everybody that really responds with what's needed to have a successful project. All right, so I'm going to start sharing. Can you see the title slide? Okay, great. So now I will go to the next slide. So the presentation is crafting a strong nonprofit website RFP insights from a web designer's perspective. I added that at the end because I kind of realized that this presentation is not going to tell you all the legal requirements for an RFP. If you're an organization that sometimes we've gotten RFPs that are 50 pages long and 48 of them are legal things that we don't hardly understand but are important to include. So I'm not going to talk about that type of stuff today. It's more so talking about, hey, if you're sending this out to web design companies or branding marketing companies, what should at least be in the scope of work part that would actually help us respond intelligently with a really competitive priced quote that includes everything you need. And as you mentioned, please feel free to put in the Q&A. I don't really expect this presentation to go maybe more than half an hour or so. So we should have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So please feel free to drop your questions in. If there are questions that are too specific for Q&A, I'll have my contact information at this end of this presentation, and I'd be happy to set up a free 20, 15-minute half-hour conversation to look at maybe what you've drafted so far and give you some insights on what to include in the RFP. And then if you're interested in us responding to your RFP, then you can always send it. But if not, the call's no obligation, of course. All right, so I'll go to the next slide. All right. Talked a little bit about us already, so I'm gonna skip that one. But just that we have these core values and we work with nonprofits. In this presentation, we're going to be covering, understanding our perspective, defining a clear scope of work, especially from like a functional standpoint. I have been building sites for a long time, and at one point I was really in the weeds doing the development and building things. So aside from the design, I do have the understanding of the functionalities of the websites and can give you some tips around that. Some common pitfalls to avoid. I'll try to keep that to be not too redundant because a lot of the pitfalls are covered in the first two steps, but I can just re-highlight some of the things that make responding to RFPs the most difficult from time to time and what we could do to avoid that. And then Q&A at the end. All right, let's get to the next one. So first we'll talk about understanding the designer's perspective. The first thing is creating detailed project objectives, and we'll get more into that. And what I mean by that, the target audience insights and the design preferences and references. These are all three very important like sections within your RFP to think about if you want to think of them that way. And I'll kind of talk about what to include. So when you think of what are the clear objectives, one of the easiest ways for me to understand, and it's probably the same for most designers, are what are the clear success factors or metrics in order of importance for a successful project? This can make it really clear to the companies, like what are you actually hoping to get from the site? And the order of priority can help a lot too, because there are some organizations where, hey, we have dozens or we have thousands of people coming to our site a month, and we just need them to be able to use the site easily and get to the program they're looking for. And that could automatically, right off the bat, help us understand, like, okay, there are other priorities, but that's the top one. Whereas some of the organizations, maybe they're saying, oh, we really need to increase our fundraising efforts and, or our search engine traffic. Just knowing those success factors and metrics in order of priority can really help us understand, if we're going to spend the time to make a detailed proposal, what are the things that we can most clearly highlight of how we're going to achieve those success factors as part of the project, and how do we propose those they get done? Like what features does the website need? What pages? How big? How small? This is just a nice clear way to put it into bullets of what the objective of the site is. That's more so bullet form and prioritize as opposed to what you see in most RFPs where it's just a vague paragraph saying, all right, we want a more aesthetically pleasing website that's going to be easier to, it's just helpful to have it in bullet form of real success factors. It also is another similar to this, a little bit to the success factors, the key audiences that you're looking for with a new website in order of priority. That's also helpful. There's always, at least 3 or 4 audiences with most nonprofit websites, and they're all important, but usually the website is serving more of them, more of one group than another, sometimes equal, but it's just good to know if there is an order of priority. And then if you want, you can kind of even tie these two things together, where if you want to say, hey, we want to approach success more so from an audience standpoint and put the audiences in order, and then the bullets under each audience of what we're hoping the website will do so great for each of them. That will also be a good way to make it clear, where before you're even talking about features and pages and all that other things, right at the top of the RFP, or understanding your audiences and the key objectives and success, factors for that project. Another thing that's very helpful is 4 to 5 reference websites that your organization likes with some notes about each of them. I love seeing this on RFPs. It really gives us a good idea for if you're saying you want something super interactive and super aesthetically pleasing to a web designer, we're usually going to start thinking of like the most amazing sites that we can imagine. And those take a lot of effort and time and budget. But if we look at your reference websites and we realize, oh, that style of site isn't so hard to achieve, and we can understand your expectations it can help early on to understand like what is, what are they trying to achieve, and what is their kind of, where's the bar for how crazy should we go in terms of budgeting for time, for design budget and development budget based on where they're hoping to land. It's also good to include notes about the status of branding and logo and design assets that you might have. I would put this bullet more of the nice to have than, what you must have. But it is good to know, is your logo up to date? Or is that part of the project? Or should it be part of the project? And also, if it is kind of a low quality logo, what are we going to have to do to get the website looking, really good, even though the logo might be a little bit dated. And it's also good just to know what you have access. I put in here availability of images and videos to use on the website, or if we should plan for stock photos to be used, heavily upon the website. That helps with design budget because finding stock pictures takes a lot of work. The stock pictures themselves nowadays are fairly inexpensive. You can download a lot of pictures for a very low fee. Um, Hardly any. We usually just include it with the websites that we build, but the time to curate and find all those pictures does take some time. And then on top of that, reviewing them with you takes a lot of time. So it's always good to know if we're going to be using your photos, or if kind of this like image finding exercise needs to be part of the project. So those are just some of the things to consider. And that was really kind of focused on, after you're in your RFP, you put in about the organization and you go on and tell us about, the mission and everything. I do like reading through that, kind of what the success for this particular project looks like and the objectives. And now we'll talk a little bit more about scope and what to include with that. All right, so I'm gonna give you some insights on how to provide detailed requirements, sharing your budget and timeline, some strategies that are helpful even if you don't want to necessarily share the actual budget, just some like ways around that and like some guidance, and then the evaluation criteria. So when we look at websites, usually what we'll do is if you don't provide the functional requirements for the site, what we'll typically do is look at the success factors, and that will give us a good guidance on, the solutions. So that's why I put this in. Experienced designers will understand the process, the list proposed solutions. So even if you don't know what to ask for from a functional standpoint, that's why it's so nice if you include the success factors, because then we can propose which functionality is needed to achieve those success factors. But if you do have a clear idea of what you want for functionality on the website, it's very nice to include a list of that, events calendar, membership sign up, online payments, any of those types of things that you can list as things that you do. And it's also nice when you can list what your website has currently and a wish list of what you want to have, or even what you have currently, what you need to have additionally in the new site, and then a wish list. And then that can really help, to come up with a proposal that is competitively priced and including the minimally required functional requirements, because sometimes nonprofits will put in a list of functionality that they want on the website, but then, we'll look at that and we'll compare it to the success factor they're hoping to get. And we'll say, listen, we could do that and it would take us many, many hours to develop that feature, or we could do this, which would be a fraction of the time. And it's just a solution the nonprofit hasn't thought of, but it makes perfect sense to do it that way. So it's good to have a little bit of a list of those things. And the other thing that's nice about the list of functional requirements is, I mean, a lot of organizations are on their second, third, fourth, fifth website by now. If we don't have that functional list, we might look at your existing site and just assume that we need to recreate all the existing functionality. Where you might say, "Oh, that was a feature that was added to our site, and nobody cares about our needs anymore. That's not part of this new project, so don't include that in your quote." So that's just another tip in terms of why it's important to include some level of detail about the requirements and functional that your site needs. Otherwise, we're kind of just shooting in the dark and saying like, well, they had it on the old site. We're assuming they need it on the new, so let's include that on there. Um, Another thing that's nice to have is a separate list of any third-party integrations the website needs. So it's nice to know what donation software your website is using. That gives us some time if it's, we've worked with quite a few by now, but it's nice because we can actually do a little bit of research and try to get an idea for like what level of integration we can integrate the donation software with the site. Like sometimes it can be embedded, sometimes it can be tied in through another kind of like Zapier integration to make it work better with the website. And sometimes it's just an embed or a direct link. But within the proposal, if we know what the donation software is, we can at least propose the best solution possible as part of our submission. Another thing is events management are really good to know. Like, what are the needs? Because there are some nonprofits we work with where they really only have two or three or four events a year, and they're like their major kind of fundraising events or just other types of major events. And for those nonprofits, we basically say like you don't need an events calendar plugin on the website. That's more of like we have some other solutions. So that's another way where we can say, hey, you don't need to maintain an events calendar on the website. Anytime you can avoid having unneeded functionality slowing down the website or needing to be maintained, it's good to avoid it if it's overkill. But if you have events that are constantly ongoing and recurring, and you even want maybe members from the public or staff members to submit events to be held for moderation and added to the calendar, there's different types of calendars that you can integrate with websites. So it's good to know what the needs are so that we can then add that into our proposed solution. Also, membership connections. Do you have like a third-party membership database? We've worked with quite a few nonprofits that are kind of like also associations or member kind of based programs. So it's good to know if that needs to be a part of the project as well as a portal. We've done quite a few board portals, and we've also done portals for employees and staff. So it's just good to know if like sometimes even if it doesn't need to be part of the first project, at least if we know that that might be something in the future, we can kind of plan for that and make sure that it's built on a platform or system that can facilitate that in the future. A sample draft sitemap is always nice to have. Gives you a good idea for like in terms of the menu system and which pages are going to be on the website and how big the site is going to be. It kind of gives us a little bit of a preview. Otherwise, similar to the functional requirements, we're just going to go off of like, oh, their previous website had 45 pages in this order, so we don't have anything else to go off. So we have to just assume it's going to be that same size site in that same order. And then when you start the project, as us web designers will always pull up the sitemap and propose changes. But even if you just do one sample draft one, it gives us a little bit more insight into where the new website is going compared to where it's been. It's also good to know if there's any preferences for how the site should be built, and also what content management system. It's perfectly fine to include a statement that says we have no preference for a content management system. That's fine with us because then we'll just propose the one that we think it should be built with, based on the requirements and the success factors. But if there is a strong, preference for WordPress or Squarespace or Wix or some other platform, it's good to put that in. And then if we disagree with that platform, we'll let you know in the questions or in the proposal. But it's really good to include that if there is any preference. Most of the time, a lot of the sites we work on are WordPress, and particularly it does make migration a little bit easier if you have like hundreds of or dozens of news and events and things like that. There is some capability to migrate that data seamlessly with WordPress versus switching to another platform. But it's all part of the requirements and, just letting us know what your preferences are, if any. It's good to provide some basic information about the website. So if it's a WordPress site currently and it's going to stay in WordPress, then as part of our proposal, it's nice to know like what theme was a website built with, what page builder, what are some limitations the current website has, what are some existing integrations the website has, just so that when you get a brand new website, you're not kind of losing some of those things that you want to keep in the process as well. So it can help us get a better idea for how easy the website will be to migrate from one system or one theme to the next theme if it's a redesign, staying on like a WordPress site, for instance. Um, we always provide our process for how we manage projects and get from start to finish. We have seen them in some RFPs where you have a preferred process for the project. So if you do have one, like you want it to be in some certain order, or if you have a specific deadline date that it needs to be done by, any of that's nice to include in the RFP. And this one seems weird. I'm sure a lot of you probably were going to include that, but we do get a lot of RFPs where it's very vague in terms of like, when is this supposed to even start? And, who's going to be involved? That's also nice to know is like how many people will be involved if there's like a website committee team or how many points of contact, because that actually often does have an impact on the review cycles and how much time should be budgeted for those meetings and those that back and forth. I wanted to give a sample. We've been talking a lot about these lists and kind of like ideas and things that you can include. This is a sample one that I put together. So like mobile first, design preferred. So that's, if you that's just an example of if your audience is, 60% mobile traffic or 70% mobile traffic, you could specifically let the designers know up front that mobile is more important in our design process. I partly also wanted to show how easy and simple your functional list could be because functional lists can sound a little intimidating. It really can just be bullets like this, and then through the Q&A, and if we get the opportunity to talk to you, we can get some more information. But it's nice just to say, and it's amazing how few RFPs have this level of detail that's so helpful. We have like mobile first, design preferred, integrate with our Boomerang donation software or whatever you're using, events calendar, safely exit button, board portal, website must be available in multiple languages, ADA compliance. So it's good to have this list of things that you care about being incorporated. And then really the designers can take that and run with it and say, okay, I see that you want this for functional requirements. Here's that in our proposal, and here's us explaining how we're, accommodating that request. So they're just examples. It's good to finalize a list and decide what you would like to keep, what you have now. That's also where the reference websites comes in really handy. Maybe you should start with your existing list, and then as you're looking at different websites that you like, you might notice certain things that those sites do that you want incorporated and add it to your list. It's also helpful to give us designers and developers a sense of the scale of your website, total number of pages, how many templates you think you need. Because sometimes maybe your site will have 25 programs, but each program will follow the same template. That would be one template. So once you figure out the rough total number of pages, you can kind of come up with like a loose number of the number of templates that are needed. But the number of pages is also just a good number for us to have because when we're evaluating the website from our standpoint, we can kind of count how many pages, but it's fairly often that you'll get into some of these sites and there'll be like 14 pages in the menu. But then when you go to redesign the website, you log in and there's like 35 more that were hidden from the menu that are still somehow needed or linked off of other pages. So it's good to know like what is the real number of pages that the company should be proposing on. And it'll help you get better apples to apples comparisons on the budgets because you might get one company that's super inexpensive, but then another company that was savvy enough to dig up those pages and include them in the quote. And now you have one big quote, one smaller quote, and probably neither one of them really knows exactly what is the right number that we should be quoting on. So if you include that in your RFP, it'll go a long way to get more consistent, fair proposals. And then you can hopefully make a decision on who you're going to go with based on fit versus just budget. Because sometimes if it's just budget, you could be going with somebody that doesn't understand the project. It's also good to know the number of blog posts, news, stories, things like that to be migrated. Preferred CMS we talked about, and the percentage of the website content migrating to new website as is. So the best you can, this can be helpful. If you're planning to rewrite the entire website, that will be a lot more work than if, hey, we're redoing our website, but we only expect to change, 20% of the content. Then we can quote a lower number, knowing that we're not going to have to go through review cycles and wait for the content to be revised. So that's helpful too. The size of the team that will be involved in the website process, I said before, but that's also helpful to know. There's some projects that we work on where, the contact team is one or two. And that comes with, a little bit of an idea for how many, how long it could take. And then we've been on other nonprofits with this whole committee of like 8 to 10 people on every call. And that can take a bit longer because you just have that many more kind of voices, working through the revisions. All right. So I did want to cover the budget and timeline. Um, in terms of getting a good budget from your designers and developers, it's really nice when you can break out the functional requirements of the website into must have and nice to have. Otherwise, we're just going to assume everything's must have and there's no ways around it. But if we get an idea for the, what it must have and what's nice to have, then we can at least provide a proposal that includes everything with a competitive price. The other option is if you do provide what your, max budget is or even a range budget, then we can say, okay, we can easily fit all those requirements into the budget, even up to the max. Or we could say, hey, we can reach up to that max, but just leave out a couple of these, or propose simpler solutions for those things so that we can stay within the budget. Um, I think some of the most successful projects we've been a part of and that we've proposed on, we've actually talked to the organizations and the nonprofits before they release the RFP. So it's nice when you have enough time to kind of gather, like talk to us, talk to 3 or 4 other companies, get an idea from us. It's weird that I'm saying like get some free information, but that's really what it is to talk to us about, what should we be thinking about the website? What do you think of our existing site? What can we add? And get a little bit of an idea to get a rough price range so that if you do want to show a budget, you're not just showing a budget based on what maybe your organization thinks it should spend or is willing to spend. You're basing that budget range based off of quotes you've already gathered so that you know it's at least in the right ballpark of people's initial thoughts. And then once you put out this super detailed, great RFP, then we can all submit a proposal based on the best, most competitive price possible based on the um, requirements and objectives and everything that's been listed. So that's that. And if there is a required launch date, it's nice to include that in the RFP. One great advantage to doing that is that, you should include it in the RFP and request a sample schedule. And then from there, you'll get an idea for, are you dealing with a company that's kind of really loose about, the process, or are you going to have a company that provides a sample schedule that shows a detailed path of milestones and meetings and things like that to get to the launch date? So that's important to include in the RFP too, because you'll show the date and people will know how quickly it needs to be done, and you'll probably get more guidance in terms of like what will it look like if you select that vendor to accomplish the project. Also, when you do put the date in, it does allow you to look internally and say, oh wow, like who's available and who's going to be having a maternity or paternity leave during this process. Do we need to kind of schedule around that, or even seasonally? Do we have our major event coming up next month? So maybe we need to factor in a week off from everyone for that. So it's good to start thinking of a timeline ahead of time and include that in the RFP so that the vendors can provide feedback on how the process looks based on that date. And once you see what will be required from the process, then you can assess like, does that date still make sense for the organization? And then it is good to ask vendors to include timeline success factors within the proposal, or I did mention a draft schedule. But yeah, hey, if you want to have vendors say, to achieve that launch date, we need to have the homepage approved by this date and this by this date and this by this date. That helps you to know, are those reasonable, milestones or asks by the vendor to your organization. All right. So just talking a little bit about the common pitfalls. This is the one where I was hoping to avoid any redundancy with what we've already talked about today. But let's see. So some of the biggest common pitfalls. Let's see. This has actually happened quite a few times lately. Nonprofits will download a RFP template online, and it's super detailed and it has lots and lots of like additional text and things like that. And the nonprofits will not remove or customize the template enough. And then it makes it feel or sound like a much bigger project than it really is. And that could really throw off a proposal process because you're asking for all these high-end things that really sometimes aren't overkill for what the organization might really want. And I've seen those templates, if they're not paid to like closely attention to, we've even seen conflicting information where we had one RFP where the task was the vendor, hopefully us, we did provide the proposal, but the vendor was to design the new website and the in-house developers at the organization would build it. But then during the RFP, there were multiple mentions of our technical approach to building a website and like needing the process of how we're going to develop and build the website. And we're like, okay, like we're not building this website. So it was just interesting how it was clearly a template that somebody had used and then kind of, repurposed, but didn't pay enough attention to customize. So that could create a lot of issues with getting a lot of like mixed results in terms of responses. I think another big pitfall, we talked a lot about gathering reference websites, looking at your site, making a list, going through this process, talking to companies ahead of time, and then putting the RFP out. I think not allowing the time to do any of that work and jumping into the RFP process is one of the biggest pitfalls. Really doing that homework leading up to it because there just isn't budget out there to kind of go and do it loose and then say, hey, just charge us as much as possible and then we can figure it out backwards. That's really not a luxury that I think nonprofits have typically. Let's see. So, other than that, it's nice to know if there is an evaluation criteria and scoring. So, cost, design preferences, references, and then giving us a percentage of in your decision, how are you going to score each of those to then select a vendor? I think that's really, yeah, nice to have in most proposals that we see that have been the more detailed ones. So I think I did pretty good. I got through that in about 25 minutes, and I think some of the people are still hanging around, so it must not have been too long. I have not checked the Q&A area. Do we have any questions that have come in?
Doesn't look like we have any yet, but feel free, yeah, to put questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll be happy
Yeah,
to answer anything that comes your way. Um,
yeah. I'll take a look at the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. And then while that waits, this is my contact information. If you have a question that you really don't want to put in the chat or the Q&A, we could just discuss it together. This is my phone number, email address, and website. So if you want to check us out on the website, you could submit a contact form and request more information, or even just submit your question to us, and that's fine. If you want to email me your current RFP and get some feedback, I'd be happy to look at it. And otherwise, or you can go to the website and there's a link to book a call and we can go over questions at that time. Yep. So I saw one question in the chat. We do stay available to clients after we launch websites for minor updates. We also provide detailed training tutorials with our websites that we finish so that most of our clients do a lot of that work ongoing, but we do still have a lot of clients that due to bandwidth or due to whatever would just prefer to have us do a lot of those things. And we do provide that. And we have two forms of that program. We have one program where a lot of our sites we build are in WordPress. So we'll actually host the website and then we'll provide routine, ongoing technical maintenance, updating WordPress, updating plugins, and other list of other things that should be happening on like a, ongoing basis. And then separately from that, there are some nonprofits that have so much going on that they want to be on some kind of like small 5, 8, 10 hour monthly retainer where we're still like actually doing consistent ongoing work. So that's another thing that we provide. So, but it's not required. If there's not a lot of needs, then the routine technical maintenance is a good option. And then we just typically bill hourly for small changes in between it. And it's usually pretty low hours or low billings because we build the site to be so easy to use for our clients that when we get a request, it takes us, hardly any time at all to complete those changes. Oh, and I'll send you this presentation also so that you can share it with the attendees or whoever, whoever wants the slides from this.
Absolutely, yeah, that'd be great.
Great. So if there aren't any other questions, then I appreciate you hosting me.
Of course, yes, thank you, Donato, so much for your time. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um, and yeah, as a reminder, slides and a recording of the webinar will be emailed to everyone after the call. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to email Donato. We'll include his contact information in the follow-up email as well. And yes, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Donato.
Bye.
Bye.